So good evening. My name is Una Proudfoot and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs with the Office of Advancement. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a two-time graduate of Acadia University in the years of 1993 and 2006. I'm coming to you from Wolfville, located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And we're less than 100 kilometers away. The land and homes are being devastated by fire. Please take a moment to reach out to friends who are being displaced or to those who are firefighters and other first responders to check on them and to offer whatever assistance you are able to. Acknowledging Mi'kma'ki before this evening's conversation means to me very much acknowledging the land and how we as humans reap the benefit from that land and all that it offers to us. And it means respecting it, much of which we can and should learn from our Indigenous neighbors. I'm delighted to be joined this evening by three wonderful people, all of whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years in one way or another. Jodie Noiles is the Sustainability Coordinator at Acadia University in Mi'kma'ki, Wolfville, Nova Scotia. In this role, she helps to advance sustainability initiatives at the university in the areas of waste, water, energy and climate change, transportation and food through student education and engagement, campus operations, community outreach, and partnerships. She's the chair of the Acadia Food Services Advisory Committee, member of the Energy Management Team, project lead for the Fair Trade Campus, Organic Campus, and Plastic-Free Campus programs, and the UN SDG program since Acadia became the first university in Canada to sign the SDG Accord. Her background includes work in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors in the areas of ecotourism, festivals and events development, marketing, environmental education, and sustainability. She's the past chair of the Atlantic Canada Universities and Colleges Sustainability Network, and she is also past chair of the Nova Scotia Festivals and Events Council, providing leadership in greening of festivals and events in our province. She holds BA in Psychology and Geography from Queen's University and a graduate certificate in Ecotourism Management from Sir Sandford Fleming College. Personal interests include birding, riding, hiking, and skiing. Originally from Kingston, Jodie now lives in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. Sarah Boudreau, a lover of food, education, and the outdoors. Sarah is an Acadia University graduate with a BSc in Nutrition from 2017 and BEd from 2020. She teaches middle school in the West Hants region and owns a 5-acre homestead with her partner, Ariane. During her time at Acadia, Sarah spent 4 years as the Acadia Farm coordinator, growing food and community through sustainable gardening. The Acadia Farm has led Sarah to a career of being a lifelong learner and educator, both in the classroom and on her own property. She didn't mention her dog in that bio. And Liesel Carlsson. And before I begin Liesel's biography, I will fully be transparent and say that I'm going to reference where her PhD is from in general, but not the specific name of the institution. But Liesel, I welcome you to pop in afterwards and help me out with that. So Liesel Carlsson, she, her, is an associate professor in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics at Acadia and a registered dietitian. She holds a Master of Science in Applied Human Nutrition from Mount St. Vincent University, which I can handle the pronunciation of, and a PhD in Strategic Sustainable Development from Sweden. She has focused her professional and scholarly work at the intersection of sustainability, food, and nutrition, some of which has been used by organizations to guide strategic and scholarly work. Her research and volunteer work has included community-led and garden-based learning about sustainable food systems and community food security. She co-chaired Dietitians of Canada's Sustainable Food Systems Leadership Team, and for this work was recognized in 2018 for leadership in advancement of the profession, rather. When not working on sustainable food and nutrition, Liesel can be found spending time with her family outside in the 60-acre wood they steward, paddling, skiing, trying to up her skills as horseback archery, gardening, or trying to keep growing children fed sustainably. I had a hard enough time keeping my children fed in general, so kudos to you. Welcome to all three of you for joining us, and thank you for joining us this evening. You've heard enough from me already. The deal here this evening, folks who have joined us to take in this information, is that all three speakers are going to share a little bit of information and time with you, one after the other, along with a slideshow that Sandra is going to be looking after back end. And then from there, we'll kind of go into some questions and answers. Goodness. So if you think of a question while the presentation is happening, again, I encourage you to write it in the chat side in the chat function, and I'll keep an eye on it and we'll do our best to get to all the questions. So I'll stop at this juncture. Liesel, please fill in the pronunciation for me. I apologize. I attempted it and then I went, no, I'm just going to leave it and leave it up to you.
Oh, I thought you did great. The institution is called Blekinge Tekniska Högskola. But I think you can just call it BTH for short. It is a technical university in Sweden. You did great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. BTH Sweden. I could have handled that for sure. So Jodie, I believe you're going to kick us off. Sandra, if you'd like to share your screen, and over to you, Jodie. And then I'll just go back in for a little while and take in all the information.
Thank you, Una and Sandra, and so nice to be joined by Sarah and Liesel, who I have worked with for quite some time at the farm, and lovely to share this presentation with all of you online with us this evening. So we're really looking forward to talking to you about the history of the Acadia Farm on the campus, the sort of past and present of the farm. But before we begin, I would also like to acknowledge that both Acadia and the community farm were established on unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I think Una said it very well. When we're at the farm, we really appreciate the bounty of the land that's been gifted to us through that experience. So important to acknowledge that in the work that we do. Next, please. So we're going to walk you through about 200 years of work on campus tonight. We'll start with a bit of a history of the original Acadia University Farm and School of Horticulture. Then fast forward to the farm today, talk a little bit about our funding partners, an archive project, research and teaching, and the student experience at the farm. Next, please. So let's step back in Acadia history and try to imagine a time when cows roamed the U-Haul lawn or pasture at the time, when students were excused from class to harvest vegetables as part of a campus operation, and barns were located where residences now are at the top of campus. Acadia was established largely on farmland, and the original farm grew up around campus from that heritage. Next, please. So Donald Oliver actually noted the significance of the farm and agriculture on campus in a really interesting article that we found thanks to our friends at the library, especially Wendy Robichaud. This is an excerpt from an article he wrote in 1959, where he said that farming is significant in Acadia history. When Acadia was founded some 120 years ago, agriculture was found to be essential. So really interesting perspective from some time ago about the importance of food and agriculture on the Acadia campus. And you can see in this wonderful vintage photo that is located in our archives at the library. This is the first college hall in 1860, and you can see cows in the field in front of the college hall at that time. So really interesting juxtaposition you wouldn't expect to see today, but at the time it was very much a part of the Acadia experience. Next, please. So the farm very much was essential to campus life. And as shown in the previous slide, it was very much a part of campus operations. And at one time, the farm actually produced most of the food for campus as part of just regular operations. And it's interesting, we haven't been able to find a lot of information in the archives about the farm because it was just part of normal everyday operations, so nothing special to record. So it's interesting how integral it was in that way that it was almost deemed unimportant to record in any significant way. in the history of Acadia. So the farm was also very much a part of it, essential part of student life. And another great picture, probably my favorite from the archives. This is from 1918, where students are excused from class. We've discovered to harvest vegetables. This is a turnip crop in the location where Chipman House is now located, and you can see Willett House in behind. And Donald Oliver went on in the same article to say it was not uncommon to see gangs of students turning out to the fields, picking up potatoes and pulling up turnips to help pay tuition. So another aspect of student life was not only the working on the farm, but students would earn an income or room and board to help with their tuition. So in that sense, it was very much a campus job, just like today, working in security or in the dining hall or in the ASU would be. In those days, you harvested turnips right on campus. Next, please. So of course, Acadia is an educational institution, and embedded in the early days was an agricultural education. And that was linked very much to our regional economy. So in this way, Acadia sort of took its place as being a really essential piece of a connection to the community and essential part of the regional economy in agriculture. And we're just learning about this history a little bit more, Wendy and I, in the archives, and she's unearthed this fabulous brochure and history of the School of Horticulture, which was actually at Acadia in the late 1800s. And this is just a fantastic flyer. If you can read it a little bit closely, all interested, and this means you should visit the institution or write for further information to the Director, School of Horticulture, Wolfville, Nova Scotia. So it just goes to show how important that sort of farm and agricultural education was. The legislature actually passed an act to encourage the establishment of a School of Horticulture. So important was this initiative. In fact, on Earth Day, April 22nd, which of course wasn't Earth Day yet, in 1893, and therein launched the Nova Scotia School of Horticulture. We've also seen it referenced as the Wolfville School of Horticulture or the Acadia School of Horticulture. It appears that the department was actually housed at Acadia, but was not an Acadia program per se, yet there were courses that would have been offered in some of the other disciplines at the time, like botany and chemistry, physical geography, soils, plant physiology. So when we do a little more research, it'll be interesting to see to what extent the seeds of future programs like food science or nutrition and dietetics or environmental science were sort of rooted in some of this early work. So we're still doing a little bit of work around that. The diploma itself was granted by the Nova Scotia Fruit Growers Association. They were very much behind this initiative to establish this program at Acadia. There were 60 students enrolled in the first year. Tuition was free. Again, it really goes to show how important the province and the region and the institution felt that food and agriculture was to the region and to educational offerings at the institution. Tuition was paid for by the province, and Acadia received a grant of $50 per student. Again, it's a little unclear the mechanism by which funding was received by the province and to the Nova Scotia Fruit Growers Association. So it's a sort of interesting history embedded with all of these organizations and the province in the School of Horticulture at Acadia. Next, please. So now we've taken a really quick step back through about 150 years or so and bringing us to today. So building on that, the history of the original Acadia Farm, embedded in education, embedded in operations, embedded in student life and experience. We really built on that beginning in 2008, starting with 2 students. Next, please. So the current Acadia Farm is a little smaller than it once was, which essentially surrounded all of campus. Such as was in the day. And so the current farm is located just adjacent to the soccer fields behind the athletic complex. It was started by two students, Alex Redfield and Hillary Barter. I'm not sure if they're on the line. They were Acadia students at the time, and if my memory serves me, this is going back a little ways now. It was actually my first year at Acadia. Alex was studying political science and history, and he had done, Liesel's nodding, yeah, he'd done a project on the history of the original Acadia Farm and with his partner Hillary, wanted to recreate the opportunity for students to again reconnect with food and agriculture on campus, and to have a chance to get their hands dirty and grow food for the dining hall for other students and to work alongside with community. So they asked the university for a plot of land and began the farm in 2008, largely as a student club with support from faculty and the institution and different departments on campus, along with friends. Liesel, I believe you were involved in those early days. I know 2009, but I'm not sure 2008. You can speak to that. So for the first number of years, it was very much a student club, an extracurricular activity. And then about the same time, we were establishing the Acadia Sustainability Office. And so it made sense for the Sustainability Office and for me to offer some continuity as students graduated and moved on to other initiatives and other things in their lives. And I could continue I think of it as an internal organization of the Sustainability Office, very much with a life of its own, still very much with students at the forefront of that experience and day-to-day in the field. And so it's been a wonderful project to be involved with for the last number of years, and wonderful to see its evolution over time. Next, please. So building on the past, we really have 5 different areas that we focus on today. One, of course, is that student experience is so important, but it has a really different life of its own now compared to what it did in 1860 and 1894. There is an extracurricular element to it, but a lot of the work that we do is embedded in curriculum, and Liesel will speak to that. There's a student service learning aspect of our work, and she'll also speak to that, and so will Sarah. And then there's just this engagement in the community that's really important, working alongside community members. And you can see pictured here in the center top photo is actually a graduate student from Kirk Hillier's lab a number of years ago, leading a workshop session for people in the community and plot holders at the farm and students about his research in agriculture and integrated pest management at the farm, where he was doing some field trials. So very much embedded in that sort of community experience as a part of the fabric of the farm, and a place where students and community and faculty and staff can work together. I should also mention in the student photo on the left, in the back on the left is Alex Redfield, one of our founding farmers. This is a group of the founding farmers, and plus there were other friends that were not pictured. And then the front, second from the right, is Hillary Barter. So great to have, this is a great picture of them from some days gone by now. And then, of course, I'm the sustainability coordinator for campus. So the farm very much for me is a cornerstone of our sustainable foods program on campus. It's an organic farm. It's an important part of our organic campus program. We are actually the first organic campus in Canada, and that's a partnership with the Canada Organic Trade Association. And the farm has been an organic farm since the beginning. Obviously, a sustainable food system is an important part of what we do, and the vision that the founding farmers had, Alex and Hillary. And so pictured here is our very own Sarah delivering organic produce to our executive chef, Peter Welton, in the dining hall for other students to enjoy. So students get really excited about the idea of students growing food for them to enjoy in the dining hall, and we do a lot of outreach there. And so this is that sustainability piece and that sustainable education piece that we do in the dining hall is really important. And then, of course, in the area of research, we host field trials for biology quite a lot. This is our current master's student, Alicia Muir, with her beehive on campus. She's working with Kirk Hillier and Dave Shuttler. And over the years, we've hosted a lot of different field trials for graduate students and undergraduate student projects on the farm in a variety of disciplines. Next, please. Another interesting takeaway for me from the article that Donald Oliver wrote was, and is very much true for the farm, is that he wrote that financing has always been a major source of problems for Acadia. And this is so true for small farms as well. And so very, very true for the Acadia Farm. It's a labor of love on a bit of a shoestring budget, and we rely so much on our important partners for supporting the work that we do in all of those areas. The support from the university and from the Sustainability Office. With important partnership is with Chartwell's, our food service provider, Service Canada Summer Jobs Program, which Sarah benefited from 4 times. And so we receive a grant from that program. The town of Wolfville provides some funding. The student union provides some funding as well, recognizing the important part of the student experience. And of course, we've had other partners over the years for a variety of initiatives, whether it's through in-kind donations. Many of the local farms have been important partners, and a number of other organizations. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some of the most important partners that are part of the farm every year. Next, please. And I think it's to Liesel.
Thanks, Jodie. Before I get going, I just want to double check that my sound is working. People are hearing me.
Excellent.
Yep. Okay, great. Yeah, it is. It's always so fun to hear some of the pieces of the history. My name is Liesel Carlsson, and I work in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics. Thank you so much, Una, for your lengthy bio and intro. So I feel like I can be quite brief here. One of the pieces that I'll add to my bio is that, yes, I am an Acadia grad. And when I moved to Wolfville in the mid to late 90s, I stayed. As all students do, you come here. I had come with a friend's family, and I stayed at a bed and breakfast just outside of Port Williams. And I kept going back to visit the person who ran that bed and breakfast throughout the time that I was a student. I would just cycle out just to go say hello. And I learned over the course of that time that the owner of the bed and breakfast had been one of the early female students in the School of what then would have been home economics. And she remembers having to go do farm service to pay for her, not for her tuition. It was mandatory for anyone who lived in residence, or at least that was her experience. So interesting to hear some of these background stories. Okay, so tonight I'm going to share a little bit about garden-based learning, and I'll pull a little bit on some of my pre-Acadia Farm experience. I'll also share some of the things that the School of Nutrition and Dietetics has been up to. I'll touch briefly on research, really just what I can add to what Jodie's already described. And then I think we're going to brag a little bit about some of the amazing alumni from our program and the ways that some of our focus on food and in part through learning at the Acadia Community Farm has influenced us. Next slide, please. So before working at Acadia, starting as early as 2003, I started to hear about and get inspired by these elementary schools, most of which I was learning about were based in the United States. But these elementary schools who were engaging children in food through gardening. And it's so interesting to me because looking back, I thought, now that is really, really innovative. And the more I learn, the more I think that's not innovative. That's just really self-evident. And recognizing that Nova Scotia is not Berkeley, California, where some of the best examples of elementary level or elementary school gardening were, I decided to try out an adapted model in Nova Scotia. And so starting in 2005, I got involved with a group at the Gaspereau Valley Elementary School and worked with some teachers and the principal and some children to do everything from building garden boxes. So you see on the left, there's some kids involved in driving some big spikes down to hold our garden boxes together, to planting the garden, to harvesting the garden. As you move across the slide toward the right, you'll see there's a couple of kids who've been picking peppers, who've been picking squash, and then taking those into the kitchen to make food. And so that's a project I'm actually still involved with today, although less and less as the years go on. But what was so interesting to me was to experience, as somebody who had graduated from a nutrition program, the difference in children's lives that in particular, because of what we were growing, what the role that fruit and vegetables, take up in their lives compared to when they learn about it on a piece of paper in the classroom. So while it wasn't this girl that we're looking at in the middle of a slide here, I have watched kids pick green peppers off plants and then just eat them like apples. And so for me, that was a real awakening of the way that really connecting with your food can really change your relationship to food and what you're willing to try and how much you care about that food. Next slide, please. And then fast forward another five to 10 years, I started teaching part-time and then eventually joined the faculty in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics, and got involved with the Acadia Community Farm, mostly through my connection to Jodie. And one of the things that we did as a group, and so as a group, that was anyone who was involved in the Acadia Community Farm management team, was to envision a spring field course. And I'm going to give Jodie credit for this idea because I'm pretty sure that it came from her, to say, well, what if we start running farm-based spring field courses? Because that's clearly the time really to be learning and teaching in this space. And at around the same time, the farm was going through a transition from a focus on a student volunteer and extracurricular experience to something that maybe had more of a strong anchor in curriculum. Food is something that it's not just about nutrition, it's not just about agriculture, it's not just biology or chemistry or history, it's a little bit all of those things. And so the farm is an amazing learning space or a learning lab for people to be learning across a lot of different disciplines. So what we're looking at here are pictures from not the first, but the second field course that we ran. I think this one is from 2014. And so in late April, early May, students are going down and they're breaking the ground and they're learning about soil and they're learning really about seasons and what growing food looks like in the very beginning of the season. So lots of heavy lifting with some wet clayey soil. If we move to the right one photo, we're going to back up for a second. To the right one photo, this is an experiment that we were doing in that class, building soil. And so, of course, because not a lot is growing in May when our field courses are running, we spent a lot of time looking at soil and what's the structure of soil and how is soil made, et cetera. And so this is the permaculture technique where instead of turning the soil, you layer on different components of what most of us know of as compost. And then you can actually plant right into that depending on how you set it up. So this was learning about soil and soil chemistry and how we build soil. And then the two pictures that are furthest to the right are pictures that were taken when we moved up to the herb garden, which is right beside the Wheelock Dining Hall. And so the students and I were doing a little bit of weeding and caring, but then also planting new herbs. The idea being that it's really close to the dining hall so that the chef can come out. And just a side story there, I think some of you on this call might appreciate, is that I borrowed a bunch of the small glass jars from our sensory lab and covered them in tin foil and then smushed up the herbs and put them into the glass jars and had students do a little bit of a sensory test. So without actually seeing the leaves, if you just smell that herb, can you tell what it is? And it was so interesting because nobody could do it, except there was one student who was like, I think I smell mojitos. There's like a mojito in this. Anyway, obviously this it was meant. Anyway, so we managed to do learning that came from a lot of different disciplines. So those are just two examples of disciplines that I drew from to make that happen. Okay, next slide, please. In addition to the field course, we've also done a lot in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics. And again, I won't take credit for that myself, but to say that I have been involved in many of the things that I'm going to describe. So under the leadership of Barb Anderson, who's here on this call tonight, one of the things that the School of Nutrition and Dietetics has always done is to put food at the center. And so I have a couple of examples of how we do that and how we use the farm in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics. One is that first year students all go down to the farm, even just to do a visit as part of their first year, first class experience. So this is the first year foods class. I'm particularly fond of this picture because many of the students in this picture have just walked across the stage about 15 days ago. And so this is a group of them who've come to the farm to do a tour and just to see what it is. One of the things we noticed is that students would get to their fourth year and say, wow, this farm is amazing. I wish I'd known about it in my first year. So that was one of our solutions. So if nothing else, they at least know that it's there. And then if they want to volunteer, they can. And then if we move into the middle, we did also do some experimenting with farm to lab. Now, these are just pictures of our labs. They're not necessarily the farm-based dinners, but we have two things happening. One is that our senior food management class did a few they experimented a little bit with farm-based fundraisers and also purchasing some of the food from the farm and bringing that into some of the food-based labs that we have. And so this is a picture of one of the dinners that our students serve. And so there was a little bit of connection of bringing some of that food in. One of the challenges we run into is that the farm is really active at a time where our classes are not very active. So we really had a small window in the fall where we could potentially purchase some of that food and use it. And then down below that, we also have a first year foods-based lab. This is a picture of our first year foods labs there. This is an activity that they were doing with children, but it just gives you a sense of what the lab looks like. And so our instructor, Sue Conlon, who I don't think is on the call tonight, did a little bit of working with her curriculum to switch out some of the foods that students were preparing in the lab to use some of the foods from the farm. So for example, she swapped out some of the recipes that we had been doing for years, which were equally valuable, and swapped in some things like students making their own sauerkraut. So they get to learn about some of the chemistry of fermentation, but they're using some of the cabbage from the farm. And then if we move to the right-hand side, we also use the farm directly in a number of classes. So one example is that I used to have senior nutrition education students participate in various community activities just to get out there and do some service-based learning. But then in this class, they also then had to design some type of nutrition education initiative. So this is just a little snapshot of a project from 2014. I chose it mostly because it had a cute picture of a school bus that went along with it, where students spent time at the farm. They were volunteering at the farm. In some years, they were volunteering at the farm also with community development students. So they got to spend time with other students from across campus. And then this particular group of students were inspired enough that their idea was that Acadia purchase a bus, and that students could then use that bus to do things like farm tours, right? Spend time at our farm, spend time at other places. The idea being to get people more connected to their food system. So these are some of the ways that we've been using the farm. Next slide, please. One of the challenges is that so many of our classes run in the wintertime. And so I'm going to give credit here to Barb Anderson again, who worked with a group of students who were inspired, from a community nutrition course that she taught with a focus on the farm to continue on and do an independent study. And these students came up with what's called a sway, or an online platform where they came up with a lot of information around farming that could be used in the wintertime. And what was so beautiful about it is it gave a little bit of a background as to what the farm is and how to garden and some really basic skills and a couple of stories. And then what I would do is I would use it in one of my winter term classes. So that runs from January until March. And students experimented with doing some independent projects, working their way through this sway. So I've used this for several years in a row now. And on the bottom of the slide, what you see is one excerpt from that sway. So at the top, you see sort of the general table of contents. And at the bottom is one excerpt from that sway. And so building on the work that Barb did with her students, I then brought this into my classroom. We would work through the modules and I would bring in guest speakers. So this excerpt here is from Dr. David Christie, who has this wonderful, wonderful story that connects farming, food, seeds, and culture, where he tells the story of his family's special garlic seed and how they brought it over to North America and the challenges they had trying to bring it over, trying to sneak it over, I think really is the better way of describing it, and how that garlic has made its way into the Acadia Community Farm. So just an example of, how is it that we managed to still keep this curriculum alive even in the winter when you can't turn over any soil. Okay, next slide, please. I won't spend a lot of time on research. I currently am not doing any research at the farm. Jodie has already talked about a couple of examples already on the left and on the far right, but I do want to acknowledge that we have had students do farm-based research. And so the example that I pulled here is an honors thesis that Monica Holmes did quite a number of years ago, looking at the farm and how it can be integrated in a sustainable way in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics. And many of the things that I have described so far are things that we built on based on some of the work that Monica did. Next slide, please. And I'm going to end up with just sort of a nice little roundup of some of the ways that I see this putting food at the center and some of the ways that we've used the Acadia Community Farm in our curriculum showing up in our alumni career paths. So on the far left-hand side, and then also the poster in the middle, come from one of our alumni, Renee Boudreau, who graduated probably around the same time as Sarah did, went on to do a master's at Dalhousie. And through that master's program, she got involved in some land-based learning with Indigenous youth, getting youth out into the land, working with crops, working with gardens, working in wild spaces, and bringing that back into the classroom or into laboratories, and getting in touch with their Indigenous food culture through some of the same things that we are doing in our program. And so it was really interesting to see. So I invited her back to my class just this past semester, where she shared some of the stories of the research that she was doing with Indigenous communities in Nova Scotia. And I just thought, oh, this is really, really interesting. To me, it's a value, or to me, it is a sign that some of the things that we value and some of the ways that we approach teaching are coming back in the career paths. So in this case, this is the research career path of Renee. So Renee is now a health promoter in Nova Scotia. If we move to the picture third from the left, this is just a little excerpt where Haley Jenkins, one of our more recent grads, was invited by the European Federation of Dietitians to help contribute to their sustainable food systems learning modules that they're developing for professionals there. And so this was a topic that she got very interested in here. So I think it's interesting to see that weaving its way in. Up in the top right-hand corner, we have a picture of Branovan Tharmarajan, who was one of our students. When he took nutrition education with me, he volunteered at that elementary school that I started by showing. He spent a little bit of time doing some garden-based learning. Branovan has now moved on to work for the grocer, where he produces hydroponic greens. There's one of those at the top of our campus, where dietitian there, Madeline Higgins, also one of our graduates, is growing greens and bring them in. So it's really interesting to see that go in there. And then the bottom right-hand picture is a picture circa 2006 from the Gaspereau Valley Elementary School garden. And I won't name any names, but I just want you to know that two of the students sitting in that picture with their newly harvested tomatoes, so most of them are sort of in grade 3 to 5 there, two of them made their way into the School of Nutrition and Dietetics at Acadia University, and made their way through our program and have moved on to some other programs now. So anyway, just an interesting for me to see that garden-based learning thread its way through people's learning paths and how it's showing up in what people are doing now. So that's it from me. I think to build on what I just talked about, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, who is also one of our grads doing some amazing work. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Liesel. I can actually, going back to the garlic, I can actually remember when we first got the garlic from David Christie and planted it. It was a pretty cool experience, and being able to talk to him and how that was brought over. It was a pretty cool story, and I was really grateful to be a part of that story coming into the Acadia Community Farm. So I'm glad that you highlighted that one from the Sway platform. Hi, I'm Sarah Boudreau. I am a two-time graduate from Acadia University with a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition in 2017 and then a Bachelor of Education in 2020. I'm just going to go over a couple of things from the student perspective, student experience of working at the farm, being a part of it, and even still now volunteering when I can in my summers to help guide those who are coming after me there. So I'm going to go over my role, the opportunities that it gave me, how I went from the Acadia Farm to now teaching in the classroom, and just some of the personal impacts that it's had on me throughout the way. Next slide, please. So being the student farm coordinator, there was a couple things that I was responsible for, and at times can feel very overwhelming, but I am so grateful for I'm forever grateful for this experience that I was able to get when I was working here. So first, the main purpose of my role was growing food for Wheelock Dining Hall and growing food for the Wolfville Food Bank. So that could look like tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, kale, lettuce, Swiss chard, like you name it. We tried everything. Sometimes we failed, sometimes we thrived, but that's the nature of gardening. And through the Wolfville Food Bank, we actually were able to put together some pretty cool things with some of the nutrition students. Later in the fall, we put together recipe cards with different varieties of vegetables that we would pack together and almost kind of give out little recipe bags to be able to give out at the Wolfville Food Bank, which was pretty interesting and pretty cool. The next piece of my role was to help facilitate that experiential learning for Acadia students. So through the work that Liesel did with the nutrition program, with Sue Conlon, through the food commodities with Bart Anderson, also on the other side of community development students and environmental sustainability students, we had cross-curricular connections down at that farm, doing everything from harvesting to planting to watering to community outreach. My job there was to facilitate and provide a space for students to be able to come down and learn with that hands-on approach and really kind of integrate themselves into that, into the farm and into the community. That leads into my next speech, which is into that community outreach portion. So looking at how can we connect Acadia University, the Acadia Farm to the greater community of Wolfville, and how can we really bring together different populations of people. So we've got that high influx of young students coming into Acadia, and then we've got our community of Wolfville members who are there year round. And how can we create a common ground, a place for everybody to kind of meet and be able to work together towards a common goal and share common experiences, but also be able to talk about things that maybe that they have, that they could share for one another, that they could learn from each other. And the last portion of my role was to be a personal plot organizer. So part of the community farm was growing food for the dining hall and for the food bank. But the other piece was to provide a space for community members to have a space to grow their own food. In Wolfville, we have some places where people might have just a window or a patio. And by having the community garden, we had a whole section where people could rent out a plot to be able to try and grow their own food. Maybe they had lots of experience, or maybe they had, like, this was their first year gardening. We provide the space so that they could grow their own food at no cost to them. It was almost like a trade system. So it was, if you volunteered so much of your time, you could have a place on at the Acadia Community Garden to try and grow your own food. And in that time, you would have people like me, the student coordinator, to be there for support, along with the other community members who were also gardening, and the students who were involved. Next slide, please. So some of the opportunities that I was granted by being the community farm coordinator, the list is truly endless, so it was really difficult to come up with a list for this one. Top of my list is probably creating deeper connections with the community. I met some amazing people that I am still in touch with today. Even when I walk down, when I'm at down in Wolfville at the farmers market on a Saturday with my partner, I see people that I would have worked with or would have kind of had conversations with at the community garden, and they always stop and say hi, and they always check in and see how I'm doing. And I think that that is one of the coolest things about being a part of this whole opportunity in the garden. Being able to keep those connections and foster those connections really touched my heart deeply, and being able to share and continue to connect with those people, I think has had a huge impact on, like, my ability moving forward in my career, and also feeling like I'm still connected and I'm still a part of the community. Another opportunity I had was being able to facilitate workshops. So not only facilitating, but also learning from those workshops. So we did things from Canning 101, learning to preserve and can tomatoes and peaches and applesauce and apple butter, season extension. So learning, okay, it's July. Is it too late to plant? Can I still plant? Can I plant in October? What does that look like? We did a composting workshop. So creating your own compost, especially if you have ever grown at the Acadia Community Farm. It is a beautiful place, but the soil is incredibly, incredibly thick and clay and heavy. So being able to figure out how to create your own compost in those situations, it saves you from having, like, going out and buying compost, and you can actually create your own source. Some other workshops that we had included some pollinator gardens and what that looks like, and just a basic garden 101. So for those people who came in and had no experience gardening, but just wanted to get their hands dirty and give it a try, we were able to facilitate a place for them to start, a jumping off point for them to learn. And if that was just learning how do I seed things? How do I space things? What should my garden look like? I was able to be a part of all that, and I was able to learn along the way with everybody else who was participating. It really helped me in my education, especially through my Bachelor of Science and Nutrition, to build my scope of knowledge of where your food comes from and how it gets to our plate. And not only just like in the production from seed to growing to harvest to preserving, but also the amount of work and the amount of effort that goes into that, and all of the working pieces that make it happen really broadened my scope and helped me realize how important it is that we know where our food comes from. I've got a little story. When I taught grade 1 in one of my practicums, we were talking about food, and we were talking about, like, fruits and vegetables, and I asked the question, like, where does a tomato come from? And one of my students raises their hand really confidently and says, the grocery store. And I tried to go, okay, but where does the grocery store get it from? And they couldn't answer the question. And for me, when I, like, as an educator now, but even through that nutrition degree, it was, we have a disconnect between our food that we eat and where it comes from, and being able to be a part of that and help to broaden that scope for other people as well was a very big opportunity for me, and it really lit the fire for me to pursue further education and pursue my dream to be a teacher and in my career, which we'll get to in a minute. The last, and I think probably one of the coolest things that I got to do was I was able to participate in a 2-day beekeepers workshop, and I actually am a certified beekeeper, which is pretty neat to say. That's a picture of me up in the right hand side there holding a frame of, there's capped brood in that with honeybees. And it was one of the most calming experiences that I've ever had. I didn't think so. I didn't think I'd be calm during it, but it was so cool to be able to see, thousands of bees coming together to create something as cool as, creating more brood and more bees and even capped honey. And pretty cool. My partner and I just actually ordered a beehive, and so we will be installing a beehive at some point in the next couple of weeks on our own property. So that's something that I was able to bring forward with me into my personal life. Next slide, please. So I've made a journey from Bachelor of Science in Nutrition, working at the Acadia Community Farm for 4 years throughout the last 2 years of my nutrition degree, and then into my Bachelor of Education degree, and I ended up in the classroom. It was a bit of not a straight journey for me. When I was in the School of Nutrition and Dietetics, I started on the route of looking at going towards the dietetics route. And when I was there, it didn't feel right. And I think a part of that had to do with the Acadia Farm and knowing how much I just loved to learn, and how much that I love to work with people and help them also learn alongside me. So the Acadia Farm really fostered my passion for lifelong learning, knowing that you're never really an expert in anything. There's always more to know. There's always more you can learn, and you can learn so much from other people. And through this, I grew my confidence to pursue teaching. So knowing that I was working with students in the field during summer camp times, in May, June, when public school students were still in school, having that opportunity to work with them and see them working with their hands in the dirt and learning, and those light bulbs coming on and the curiosity, that really fueled me to be like, you know what? I want to pursue what I love to do. And I think what that is I think that's educating, and I think that's teaching. And a big part of that is the hands-on approach in the classroom. I was a student that I'm a very antsy person. I'm active. I like to be moving and working around, and I learn best when I'm doing. And I got to see that in real time in the field. On the left here, I have a picture of some, I believe they're grade 2 students who were down from Wolfville Elementary, who were learning to plant. I believe we were planting beans at this time. So we were working on, what does it look like? How do I plant it? How do I know how far to space it? How do I know I'm doing it right? And all of those conversations also led to other paths, which weren't even to do with gardening sometimes, but they were still valuable lessons for them to learn. How do I work cooperatively with somebody else? Like, how do we work together to achieve one common goal? Those are all things and life lessons that students need to learn alongside with those academic portions. On the right-hand side, you'll see there, this was for a summer camp. It was a Acadia, I believe it was one of the Acadia summer camps that were hosted by at the athletics complex. And we were looking at these frame of bees, and we were talking about how the bees all work together. And we got into the kind of the biology side of like, how does it work? How do they collect nectar? How do they put it in the cells? How do the baby bees live? What's the life cycle of them? How do they know when to go out and forage and when to not? And so it was pretty neat to see how invested these students were in learning in a space that if you were to do that in the classroom and hand them a worksheet or watch a video, you probably wouldn't get that same spark, that same drive for them to learn, and that same curiosity. And I think that really comes down to empowering youth to make a difference through gardening. So working through and looking at how empowered they were and how proud they were of doing what they were doing at the farm and learning what they learned really kind of brought together everything for me. And I said, and then I decided that pursuing education was where I wanted to go next. And I have since then taught at the elementary level, but now I found myself settled in the middle school level. And last year, I brought down my grade 8 class from Wolfville School, and we did a tour of the farm and talked about the sustainability side, because one of our curriculum outcomes was looking at climate change and what we can do and what grade 8 students can do to impact climate change in a positive way. And I thought, what better way to do that than to bring my students down to the Acadia Farm and be like, look, right here down on the dikes is a place that you can come, that you can make an impact, that you can grow your own food, that you can start this journey on making those small steps to help with climate change. Next slide, please. The last piece that I'll talk about here is just the personal impact on the farm. I don't know if I can say it enough. I am forever grateful for the experience that I've had with the Acadia Farm, and I truly believe that it shaped me into the person I am, and it shaped me into the educator that I am today. This is a picture on the left of my partner and my dog, Anna. It's there for you, Una, on our 5-acre homestead, sitting in front of a blueberry bush. Since then, we have grown and raised our own meat and our own eggs. And we also have quite a large garden that we keep adding to, and it seems to be forever expanding. It never seems that we have enough space there. But looking at where I started, nervous, not knowing or really sure of if I was doing it right, to where I am now, where I'm confident enough to be trying to grow my own food, and my partner and I working together to create a sustainable source of food for ourselves. I owe that to the Acadia Farm and the community members who supported me along the way. I built lifelong friendships, and that's in the community members, Jodie, Liesel, nutrition department, faculty and staff, Acadia community members, like the list goes on. And like I said before, I walk down Wolfville and I see at least 1 or 2 people through that connection of the farm. And for me, that's a big piece of my being able to keep those friendships. Big piece is confidence. I don't know how many of us here are gardeners, but we know that we can be as confident as we want in the garden, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And so just building that knowledge and knowing that, you just got to do everything with confidence. And sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not going to work, but you just keep moving forward. And that moves into that patience and humility bit. Really being able to be patient and know that sometimes things take time. Sometimes things don't work out, and that's okay. And just being okay to know you don't know everything and not everything's going to go right. But at the end of the day, if you did your best and you put your best foot forward, that's all you can really ask for. So that is the end for me. And I will move it on to Jodie. Is it back to you? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I love hearing about your journey, and it's wonderful that we've kept in touch and that you've been able to mentor some of our new students at the farm. And we've packed a lot into this presentation, and I see we're running a little bit at a time, but I'll just close with a few things and maybe we'll take a few questions from folks online. One thing we all touched on, didn't expand on, we could probably have a whole session just on the community garden aspect of the work that we do. The farm serves as the town of Wolfville Community Garden, and so it's just such a wonderful space for students, Acadia students, to work alongside community members in that space, learning and supporting each other and growing together in so many ways. And I'm so glad, Liesel, you told Gito's garlic story, David Christie's garlic story. That's such a great sort of family and farming heritage story. And I'm glad you both touched on this sort of community service as well as the service learning model of the work that we do, which is so important. So sort of building on all of this, we are always looking ahead to the future, just like any passionate gardener is always thinking ahead to what next season is going to look like. We're in the midst of this current season, just begun with our new coordinators pictured here, and I think that they might be online as well. This is Sophie Noiles and Lisa McMinn. We have 2 coordinators this year. Sarah could have been so lucky to have a second coordinator to work with her, but we're lucky this year to have been able to pull together funding for a second coordinator. So Lisa and Sophie are working together, and they've both just graduated from Acadia, Sophie from nutrition and dietetics, and Lisa from community development and sustainability studies. So it's wonderful to have them working as a team, and they're a perfect mix of knowledge and skills and experience to bring to the farm this season. So working with them, we've just gotten started. We took this, I think, Friday, Thursday or Friday. So we're just getting into the field and starting to plant, and they were prepping actually for our first workshop with youth, which was Friday afternoon. And so over this season, we're going to be building on a lot of what we've done already, growing our teaching and research work, working with faculty and a number of classes across several disciplines, working on strategies for making that Sustainable Food Systems course a permanent offering in a curriculum. Right now it moves around. It's been an intersession, it's been a fall course, it's even been a winter course, but we'd like to establish it as a permanent course in the fall for students to have that experience across different disciplines every year. Continuing to increase student and community food security initiatives. We didn't talk about the food security aspect of what we do, but it's such an important part of the work that we do at the farm. Continuing to expand community partnerships in Wolfville, but beyond in the province and elsewhere. And as some of you might know, and has been mentioned a little bit, continuing to explore meaningful ways to embrace and embed Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge in the way that we do our work at the farm. And we do already do Three Sisters planting, but we'd like to engage more with our Indigenous students and our Black students and build out this piece, working with those partners. And then all of this work incredibly happens thanks to student coordinators, recent graduates, volunteer time from community members and students, faculty who do this off the side of their desks. But one of the things, the holy grail for us is securing funding for a full-time 9-month coordinator who will work from April to December. Everything we've talked about, we pack into 6 months from May 1st to October 31st, and we can extend the season and do so much more in the fall semester if we can put some funding in place for a full-time 9-month coordinator. So that's the big ambitious plan for moving the farm forward. Next slide, please. And one thing you can help with, actually, we love the archive project that was begun a number of years ago with actually students doing some work in history who started gathering this information, and we've been working with the library since. But there's not a lot of material in the archives, images or documents or stories about the original Acadia Farm. So we would love if any of you online have any materials about the original farm or stories to tell or photos that you can share, or know anyone that might have some of these documents. We want them because we would like to grow the archives in this area. It's such an important part of Acadia history that we don't want to lose. And so please share any of that information with us. And you can email me, or you can send it directly to archives@acadiau.ca, and you'll get Wendy. And she'll be so excited to receive your stories and images. Next slide, please. And with that, a lot of information. I'm sorry we've gone over a little bit, but there's so many wonderful stories to tell about the farm, and I hope we've given you a bit of a sampling menu of all of what we do at the farm. And we invite you to visit us anytime. We might put you to work if you come down, which I'm sure you'll enjoy, and meeting the current students, Sophie and Lisa, and the members of our community. So thanks so much, and we'd be happy to take any questions if we have a little time.
Thank you so much, Jodie, Sarah, and Liesel. I'm sitting here listening to the three of you, and my father, who was a botanist and horticulturalist, would always say to me the important ingredients to growing anything, right? The sun, the water, the soil, good compost. But he always talked about the TLC. And if the amount of passion that the three of you have shared with us this evening translates to the TLC behind your growing, no wonder we're feeding a campus. So it's just incredible to hear from each of you, from each of your perspectives, and all that you've contributed to the Acadia Farm, to the School of Nutrition, your chosen career paths. It was incredible, and really, really appreciate it. We are tight on time. I do want to just make sure that if folks have a burning question, that they have an opportunity to put it in the chat function and or raise your virtual hand. We certainly have some very supportive, very promising comments in the chat function. So I encourage each of you to read those when you have a moment. I think that one of the biggest quotes that I'll bring away from this evening's conversation was when Sarah said, "Sometimes we failed, sometimes we thrived. That's gardening." And then I thought, for somebody who's hesitant to garden, I'm always afraid. I think that I'm going to disappoint my father, the botanist. But it really is an important piece to remember, is that, you know, you try and a lot of times you'll reap the rewards, but a lot of times disappointment as well. So excellent, excellent words there, Sarah. You know, we've got lots of people online. Barb Anderson is online. You referenced her. Happy to hear 2 students who have joined you and will be taking the next steps at the Acadia Farm. Any questions or comments from folks in the chat function? And while I'm waiting on that, again, like I say, just really want to circle back, Jodie, to your last couple of slides, and really appreciate a couple of your call to actions. So when we do these virtual events, we're hoping to create awareness. So we hope that we've done that for our viewers here this evening, and anyone who watches it afterwards when it's in the virtual library. So creating awareness and promotion around what you're doing and why you're doing it is fantastic, but also that call to action. So being able to dig into the archives or their own personal archives and see if they have pictures or stories to share with you. You mentioned Don Oliver, and I don't know if you know, but he, in his book, A Matter of Equality, he talks about the Acadia Farm. So it's nice to hear that reference. And also in funding. So if there are folks on the line who are interested in helping in terms of financial support, there is, of course, a way to do that as well. So some things to think about. Elizabeth, I see that you've come on video. Would you like to ask a question?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I haven't been to the farm in such a long time. My mother-in-law's father used to be the manager, and
oh, wow.
The last name was Lockhart. And so, oh my goodness, we're talking, I'm not sure when he retired, probably the 70s sometimes, maybe. So it was a long time ago. So I was just interested to see what was going on with the farm now.
Well, hopefully we satisfied that for you this evening with the pieces of information in the presentation from our 3 speakers. And certainly, you know what, if folks have questions past after we sign off here, send them along to the alumni office and we'll make sure that they land in the right hands. Absolutely. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask a closing question, if I may. And that is just in terms of and I don't know who best to answer this, so I'll just toss it out there and see who grabs it. You know, what would it look like if we were to set our sights on the Acadia Farm producing enough to feed the campus for its duration of what we would call sort of maybe a typical academic year? And I love even the 3 reactions that the 3 of you just gave as I asked that question. So what does that look like? And is there a desire to get to that point?
Well, that would be a pretty ambitious production on the scale of property we currently have. I think I'd have to take over some of the all the soccer fields. We'd probably have to take over the Irving Center phytotrons, because if we need to grow in through the winter and use the greenhouses. So like that's a pretty big scale of production. And so, you know, and also we might think about whether or not we would want to do that as an institution. Certainly, we would like to expand production and create more opportunities for learning and research on campus. But such an important part of our sustainable foods program for the entire campus is our relationship with our community and our local farms. And we do that by buying locally. So we actually we have a target of purchasing 50% of our food for campus locally. Over the next 10 years. We're at about 25% right now. So, you know, I think that's really still a really important part of what we want to do at Acadia. So sure, I'd love to expand production, but I also still want to support our farmers and neighbors and our regional economy by buying from our local producers.
And there's another call to action, Jodie. Well done. Absolutely buy local, right? And so for those of us who are fortunate enough to live in this area, you know, Saturday morning at the farmers market is a great place to start, right? So absolutely. Liesel, over to you.
Thank you. I love the question. I think if we had an agricultural program, that would make sense. One of the things that I learned from some of my early conversations with the principal at the elementary school I was working at, which is situated in, like most schools in Nova Scotia, rural Nova Scotia, I think used words to describe what I knew but hadn't really quite been able to formulate in my head yet. She said, you know, the value of having this garden in the school is not just teaching kids to connect with their food, but to show them that growing food is valuable, right? That this is actually a profession, it's a set of skills that we value in the school system, and then you can carry that with you into life. And I think that's a really important thing that we can also offer at the tertiary level. So building on what Jodie just described, it is also an opportunity to show our our students who come to university to get a university education that growing food is a really sophisticated set of skills, and it is absolutely a valuable career path. And even if it's not your career path, it's an extremely valuable thing that people do with their time. So I think I carry that piece of wisdom with me always. You know, I was growing food with children who grew up on farms, so they had all kinds of things to teach me. But what we were showing them was that yes, and what you and your grandparents are doing is absolutely valuable.
You know, and as you're saying that, Liesel, and so many times during each of your presentations, all kinds of puns are running through my mind, of course, and I'm a sucker for a good pun, I got to tell you. But it's about that the hands-on piece of the gardening that's happening right on campus. But it's so much about the education, and right from what you're doing, Sarah, to what you're doing, Liesel, to the planting those seeds in all of those people to go on and do that work, right? So it's in so many areas that's happening. Oh yeah, Liesel, I could go on. I have a long list of puns written here. When you were talking about Jodie, when you were doing the history and you were talking about barns were located where some of the residences are, I was like,
that's a whole other presentation. I think we've got some good stories in the archives about that too.
Yeah, and even the turnip crops where Chipman now sits, I was like, yeah. Anyway. So listen, thank you all three of you for being here, and thank you to everybody who joined us online tonight. It's getting to that time of year where we're going to start to lose some numbers because folks want to spend it outside in their gardens.
Una, before you close, can I just do something? Indulge me for a sec.
Sure.
Lisa and Sophie are online, and I warned them I might call them out. I just want them to say hello and just speak really briefly. Both there's Sophie and Lisa, and there's Barb, and just talk. You've only been on the job for like a month and a half working with me, and you're going to get to meet Sarah this summer. And of course, I know you know Liesel. So maybe just like really quickly, just talk a little bit about what you've been doing and how the experience has been for you so far.
Well, thank you, Jodie. Thank you, Liesel and Sarah. It's super great to hear you guys speak. First, it's been awesome to be just a part of the farm. I've not actually had any gardening experience until now. But yeah, I've been working on the farm plot for the last few weeks, and we actually just planted some carrots today. So that was kind of some hard work, but I've just really been enjoying being out there and connecting with people. We met one of our plot holders named Heather on Friday, and that was really sweet to get to know her and just to share experiences and things. So I'm really excited about this experience.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Sophie has said, it's been really great so far. It was really great to hear all of you speak as well, and just learn about the history a little bit more, and the past farm coordinator position as well. Yeah, it's been amazing so far to connect with some community members, and just be outside farming. It's been really awesome, and I'm looking forward to learning so much more this season, yeah, and just really enjoying the experience.
That is so wonderful. Thank you for suggesting that, Jodie. And thank you, Sophie and Lisa, for chiming in. Love to hear it. And I will absolutely make my way over on one of these nice days, or even maybe not one of these nice days, maybe on one of these sort of dark, dreary, rainy days that we know are also important, especially now, to say hello. And actually, it was when Sarah was the farm coordinator that I made my way down to the farm for the first time. So it's nice and close to my office. I'll have to be careful though. My boss is online, so I don't want her thinking I'm dipping out on my job to go over and check on the farm, but I'll be over for sure. So thank you for being with us this evening, Sophie and Lisa, and it's really nice to put faces to the names for sure. And we'll end off with me telling you that you don't know this, but we entered all of your names in for our draw for this evening, and we have a little gift that we're going to send out to somebody, and I promise you in no way, shape, or form was this rigged at all. It was absolutely fluke. And this person's name was referenced a couple of times, and her video is now on. She's already shaking her head. Look at that. So many know Barb Anderson as the head of the School of Nutrition, now retired. I know her as that, but I also know her as a current Alumni Association board member. Thank you, Barb, for joining the board. And your name was drawn this evening. So I know it wasn't rigged. I promise it wasn't rigged. So we have a great little idea of something that we're going to get out to you for joining us this evening. So thank you.
A Tully mug.
You're not getting a Tully mug from the Acadia Farm presentation, but nice try. And Jodie and Liesel and Sarah, I'll be in touch with you as well. Thanking you very much for your time and your knowledge and your passion. For me, it really, really was about the passion that you shared with us this evening. So thank you. So folks, get out there, get your nails dirty, get your hands dirty, and get some growing going, and buy local, and dig into some of your pictures and see if you've got something to contribute to our archives. So thanks everyone. Have a great evening.
Everybody.
Take care.
Great
Bye-bye.
job.